Welcome everyone to my first video in a new review series I'm doing, my post-playthrough thoughts and review, or Peter videos. It's close enough, we'll let it work. Since this is my first Peter, I thought I'd clarify something by stating explicitly that this is not intended to be a conventional review. There's no numerical score at the end, and I might not touch on every aspect of the game. Instead, what I'm going to be doing is telling more of a story. I'll share my history with the game and my perspective going into it. I'll touch on my experiences during my most recent playthrough of the game that I played on stream, and I'll end it off with some general thoughts. Did I like the game? Would I recommend you play it? And am I going to be looking into more of the series? These videos are more meant to generate discussion and to help me form an informed opinion on the game, and not to claim that a game is objectively good or bad, since it wouldn't really be fair to assume my thoughts are universal. Because I'm talking about my most recent playthrough, there may be some spoilers, but I'll try to keep them at a minimum. No promises though. Now that I've let you all know what this kind of video is about, let's jump right into the first one. Recently on stream, I finished playing through an old favorite of mine, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Here are my thoughts on that playthrough. I've been a very big fan of The Legend of Zelda for years. I got into the series through Twilight Princess on the Wii back in elementary school, and I was immediately hooked. Throughout the years, I kept adding more and more Zelda games to my collection. By the end of high school, there were only 5 Zelda games I hadn't played at least once. 6 now that Breath of the Wild is out. It didn't matter whether it was a 2D or 3D Zelda game. Zelda was fun. I loved the action, and the puzzles, the stories, the characters, and especially the world of Hyrule. There actually wasn't a single Zelda game that I played that I didn't enjoy playing. Although you have to remember, I'm not necessarily the hardest person to please. Back around grades 9 and 10, I went on a bit of a Zelda marathon, since I kinda wanted to actually know which game was my favorite. I played through the old classics I missed, like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, as well as some less popular gems including Link's Awakening, the Minish Cap, and Spirit Tracks. All in all, I think I played about 8 or 9 Zelda games over those 2 or 3 years. And in the end, this is the list I came up with for my top 3 favorites. Number 3, A Link Between Worlds. Number 2, Skyward Sword. And my absolute favorite game in the series, Wind Waker. Yeah, Wind Waker was the game I felt I'd had the most fun with. I played the remaster on Wii U. In fact, it came bundled with the console. The Wii U was the first console I ever bought myself with my own money. In fact, it even came with this limited edition gamepad, called the Zelda stencils. So, perhaps the game had some extra sentimental value attached to it. But after my Zelda marathon, I moved on to some other games, like the Metroid Prime Trilogy, Xenoblade Chronicles X, Earthbound, and Earthbound Beginnings. And then I got really into League of Legends, so I ended up in sort of a Zelda drought. Even when Breath of the Wild came out, I didn't go buy it right away for Wii U. By the time I decided to play Wind Waker on stream, it had been at least 2 years since I played through a Zelda game. On saying that out loud, I actually can't believe it's been so long. So does Wind Waker still hold up as my golden standard for a Zelda game? Or was I even easier to keep entertained as a teenager? As I mentioned earlier, the version of the game I have is Wind Waker HD for Wii U. I know the original holds up really well still due to the cel-shaded graphical style, but holy moly, this remaster is beautiful. The dungeons are all aesthetically pleasing, the lighting effects are pretty neat, and the major towns are bright and colorful. Even better than the graphics, as to be expected from a Zelda game at this point, is the music. The Great Sea theme playing right now is so powerful, and it never fails to bring a smile to my face. Dragon Roost Island's theme is, in my opinion, one of the catchiest songs in the entire franchise. Zelda dungeon music tends to be fairly forgettable sometimes, but there's a few standout tracks here, like the Wind Temple's theme. And don't even get me started on the title theme and its variations throughout the game. The melody of that piece is timeless. The music brings so much to this game that it's incredible. I loved it, and I can't praise the soundtrack enough. I found sailing around the Great Sea to be pretty enjoyable, actually. Now, keep in mind, I got the Swift Sail just about as early as you can possibly get it from the auction house, so I was pretty lucky in that regard. This sail strips an incredible amount of tedium from sailing, since it not only boosts your speed, but also automatically changes the direction of the wind as you turn. My opinion is probably colored by the fact that, outside of the fairly linear early game, I never had to sail without it. While sailing from point A to point B, the daytime visuals and music would pump me up, and the calming sounds of the sea at night would give me a nice moment of respite. Naval combat is okay. Nothing really special though, and aiming cannonballs can be a pain. I ended up just using the bow against sharks once I could. Luckily there's not too many naval fights, and the scripted ones are actually pretty solid. I did get some enjoyment out of those. Wind Waker's land combat, however, is extremely fun. It's not a super deep system, but you can definitely get good at fighting things. Link has his typical backflip, jump attack, side leap, ZL targeting, and slices, but in this game there's also a counter system that lets you either leap in the air and strike an enemy's head, or roll behind them for a backslice at the press of a button in response to their attacks. I found the counters super fun to use, and I really liked how there's certain rare situations in which your counters can miss, since it prompted me to avoid using the counters as a crutch and fight a little more proactively. Then you throw in your various items, as well as certain minor enemies who are immune to your sword, and I always felt I definitely had options when finding myself in a difficult situation. The combat can admittedly feel overly simplistic when just fighting one enemy, because you just wait for an opening and you never stop slashing. But when fighting large groups of tougher enemies near the end of the game, especially Darknuts, it feels really satisfying to mix up your moves and come out on top of them all. Wind Waker's story isn't complicated at all. There's a few minor reveals or developments between the three major acts of the game, but nothing that drastically affects your progression beyond increasing the scope of the narrative. The storyline was enough to keep me invested, don't get me wrong, but it's generally a simplistic plot. Save your sister, grow stronger, stop Ganondorf. The thing that really carries this game is the characters. Between Tetra, Medley, Makar, Errol, Grandma, the King of Red Lions, and yes, even Tingle. The Wind Waker's cast is extremely strong. In line with the tone and depths of the story, few characters get extensive character development, but they're all super likable. Except maybe Tingle. Okay, fine. Tingle was also fun to watch, despite how goddamn creepy he can be. I genuinely cared about these people, and most characters you're introduced to through the narrative show their faces again and again, creating a cohesive cast. Some of these people are actually really funny too, especially Nico, the lowliest pirate on Tetra's crew. Link himself even serves as comic relief sometimes, with his goofy facial expressions in the middle of tense situations, continuing the long-standing tradition of Link being a massive dork. The game takes itself just seriously enough to be captivating without being so serious that the story itself isn't a fun time. This Zelda game definitely isn't afraid to have some fun with its story. Wind Waker didn't have that many dungeons in it compared to some other Zelda games, but what it did have was fairly enjoyable. Dragon Roost Cavern and the Forest Haven were fine introductory dungeons, and don't get me wrong, I enjoyed them, but the game really picks up after that. The Temple of the Gods, the Wind Temple, and especially the Earth Temple all offer unique challenges and interesting aesthetics. The Earth Temple was my favorite dungeon, thanks to its great atmosphere and engaging gameplay, while Dragon Roost Cavern was probably the most forgettable, which is disappointing considering how much I like Dragon Roost Island. I did actually enjoy the Forsaken Fortress near the beginning of the game, which I understand is an unpopular opinion. The stealth sections are a bit clunky, but I still thought it was okay. Keep in mind though, I've recently played through Thief Gold and was simultaneously playing a stealth-oriented character in Skyrim while playing through this game. Stealth is just something I enjoy. Boss fights were consistently not extremely challenging. To be honest, I'm okay with this. I had plenty of opportunities to test my skills in combat against mini-bosses and large groups of enemies throughout the game, and most of the bosses were still fun to fight. This game preserves the Zelda tradition of using the item you just got in the dungeon against that boss, meaning it wasn't too hard to figure out how to handle them. The exception to this easygoing rule was the final boss, Ganondorf, whose fight absolutely tests the limits of your combat skills. This fight is super dramatic, and the challenge of it was exhilarating. It kinda makes me wish the other bosses had been a little bit harder. Looking back, I don't actually remember dying during my playthrough, so either I was a bit better than I gave myself credit for, which is possible, or the game was a bit too easy. I'm leaning a bit towards the latter, but I'm sure both are true to a degree. That being said, I did have fun with all these bosses, and at the end of the day, fun is the most important factor when talking about a game. Unfortunately, in my opinion, Wind Waker does have one glaring fault. I feel as though the side quests are fairly weak. Most of them are concentrated in Windfall Island, and yeah, there are some fun ones, but most of what I was really interested in ended up being a part of the main story anyways in the final act. A lot of the side activities in this game mostly revolve around exploring the sea and sailing back and forth. You can use your treasure charts to dig up treasure, but that gets really tedious after a while. I didn't even end up doing the Merchant's Quest, this game's long trading quest, just because all I'd be doing is visiting all the islands to see if a merchant has appeared there. Now, I don't want to be so negative for all the bonus content. I did enjoy certain aspects like the Thief in Windfall Island and the Korok quest, and when I did end up finding a little bonus submarine in the ocean, clearing it out was usually enjoyable and worth the time. But I guess most of the bonus content just didn't appeal to me personally. Furthermore, some of the minor islands were dull. There's a few islands to which the story will never take you, and quite a lot of them are just frankly bad in my opinion. You go in, solve a really short puzzle, and get a reward. Then you're done. I'd be lying if I said I flat out hated these islands, but I really do feel like there's a lot of missed potential here. Let's make sure we end on a positive note though. Wind Waker is very fun, and though I criticized the sailing back and forth, don't forget that I really liked the sailing in this game. I just don't want to do it forever. In fact, sailing to every island to fill out my map felt extremely rewarding, and that's technically side content to an extent. This also grants crucial information relevant to progression, which I think is really cool, since it encourages exploration, but it doesn't force you to commit a disgusting amount of time. Technically, you could also just not talk to any of the fish, explore your own way, and discover all the natural progression points yourself, although that would be a lot harder. Plus, the minigames are actually really good for a quick diversion. I wouldn't play them for hours on end, but Salvatore's battleship clone, for example, is good fun. So ultimately, I think Wind Waker's side content is weak, but there's some redeemable factors here. With the main game being so good, it didn't end up affecting my enjoyment too much at all. So in the end, that leads us to our last few questions. Would I recommend you play Wind Waker? Without question, I can say that I would. Yeah, the game gets a bit tedious at times, and I recognize that I had a really lucky playthrough in terms of obtaining tools to progress quickly. I never had to grind for money, for example. But the whole experience is just so charming. The combat is fun, the world is exciting, the characters are great, and the climax to it all? Fantastic. Though I don't have as much recent Zelda experience to compare it to as I'd like, I still think Wind Waker might be my favorite in the series. The game is just fun, and it absolutely reminded me how much I love the Zelda franchise. Playing through Wind Waker again has really psyched me up for when I finally get to experience Breath of the Wild. I want to thank you all for listening to my ramblings about this game. I hope the video was fun to watch, and if it inspired you to try the game for yourself, I hope your playthrough is just as good as mine was. Let me know if you enjoyed this kind of content, and I'll be sure to make more. I'm trying to get better at criticizing games instead of just blindly loving them, and I don't think I'll ever be able to go fully negative, which, you know what, I think that's a good thing. It took us 8 streams to beat this game. And if this is the first you've seen of my content, you can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/turkeysub23. For those of you who were there during our Wind Waker streams, thank you so much for experiencing this wonderful game with me. I hope you have a fantastic day, and take care.